Wow. We've really had a jam-packed evening tonight and amazing, amazing insights. And I'm really, really proud to be chairing this panel. Just a reminder that you can put your questions through in the chat. But before we take questions from the audience, I would like to put 4 key questions to our panel. So we're going to start off by talking about what drives this space. What are the key drivers in women's health? And I think if we can start with Alyson, what do you think is the key driver in the next, let's say, 5 years that's going to drive women's health forward?
I think the key driver is women. And I say that because if we look at the past, when women come together, then we have been more likely to be successful. When you think about major changes in our world or our society, one woman doesn't often come to mind. But when you think of the women's health movement, you think of the Me Too movement, every time women come together in a collaborative way, which is how we sort of work anyway, I think that we can make a difference. And I just want to say it was really lovely to hear Dr. Barreto's talk, because it shows you, that there is funding going into this, and there's so much work to be done. And so I sort of define the problem, and it's nice to hear, from the other panelists that are creating the solution. So that's my short answer. I think
amazing.
Together.
Thanks, Alyson. Keren, can we hear from you next?
Sure. I'd like to echo Alyson and say that I think that the biggest driver would be women. But I have to say something in addition. And so I'm going to say that if this ecosystem continues to evolve and develop like we've seen in the past few years, I think this will not be discussed of anymore as a niche, but will be discussed of as a relevant ecosystem to invest in, to innovate in, to bring together thought leaders and money and exits. And this will create even more innovation and more drive. So that's what I believe.
Great. Nimros, can we hear from you next?
I would say that better awareness for women's health and the role they are playing in their family's health. We can see the springs now, and it's gaining more and more traction as more and more women's organizations are demanding what they deserve. And I think that this awareness will be the driver of women's health in the next years as it increases.
Amazing. Thanks. And Brittany?
I would have to say data. So I'm influenced by data, and it's one thing to say this is the right thing to do to put your money into women's health, but it's another when you show the financials behind it and the numbers. I am in it for both reasons, the impact and the numbers, but whatever we can do to get people on board with talking about women's bodies that isn't just in terms of us being a womb. I'm excited about. So I'll say my answer is data as a driver.
Amazing. The next 2 questions that I'd like to put to the panel, because they're kind of linked, is restraints and challenges in this space. Maybe we'll start with you, Brittany, and just what are the key things holding us back at the moment?
My goodness. Okay. So number 1 is advertisement. So we're not allowed to say breast, vagina, sexual wellness, anything that essentially has to do with women's bodies, we're not allowed to run advertisements for. So something that's a big concern for femtech investors is that the CAC, the cost to acquire a customer in women's health, is twice as high than anything else, because we have to go through so many hoops with Facebook ads being denied. So I would say media and the, decision makers of what's appropriate and what is not appropriate. And then I would say secondly, at least in the United States, we have a huge funding issue from the government. So I love seeing Israeli and European startups in femtech having raised millions in governmental funding before they even reach out to me. Whereas US-based femtech companies, we do not have in the United States a pot of money in our government for women's health, which is absurd. So we need early stage R&D funding. And lastly, I will say, oh goodness, what was the last one? I'll just stop there. There's two.
Thank you. Keren, can we hear from you about restraints and challenges?
Sure. I think, again, the restraints would be the amount of money going around in the space. I think it's a little harder for entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs, specifically in the space, to raise money. And that also has to do with the size of the companies. A lot of the companies in the space are very small, tackle a specific problem, are not usually in the pharmaceutical space, but maybe more in the device or the digital health space. And that may pose a little bit of a restraint. I think one of the challenges, other than for me personally losing 10 kilos from COVID, would be to really scale up. I think that with the regulatory hurdles across the world, including the US, but including in Europe and in China, it's very, very difficult to really scale up. If it's sales, if it's marketing, it really poses a huge challenge for a lot of companies, not only in femtech. I do want to say one thing, and OCON is also funded by the Israeli government. We've got a lot of funding and a lot of support, but the pot of money is not specifically for women's health. This is something we need to fix also. We need to make sure that the government also stands behind women entrepreneurs, because a lot of the women that I mentor and coach have a very hard time getting government funding because of the size of their idea or the product that they have.
Just to add to that, I wanted to ask you how they kind of weigh up a single product or device versus a platform, because you mentioned, and Ocon's a perfect example, that investors can see the potential of the platform, because it's really the platform, the innovativeness of the platform, that generates the potential. So should female founders be looking at, when we say we want to match unmet needs to technologies, should we be looking more at innovative ideas that can serve as platforms for more than one solution in women's health, as opposed to an isolated product?
Ronell, that's such a great question. And this is really one of the reasons I want to create a hub at OCON, and to really make sure that we can, bring in other companies in the space, because a lot of these companies are very small and require not a whole lot of funding. And when you have a company like OCON, and I always say there's no company like OCON, right? We're not a Bayer, a Merck, or a Cooper or a Hologic, but we are an R&D driven company. And there's really not a whole lot of companies that manufacture and promote and market and do all the research and development in labs. And so I think that if we can find a way of breaking down the walls of IP and bringing companies together to create more hubs of technology, I think this would be easier to fund. And this is something that, my 5-year plan moving forward would be just that.
Great.
To see how to bring together more technology. So it's not necessarily a platform, but it's a company that really serves women's health, serves the same physician, serves, the breadth of women from our youth all the way through menopause. So I think that's a really good question. Thank you.
Amazing. Nimros, your challenges and restraints?
Yeah, I would go back to awareness. There is not enough awareness among decision makers and financiers, including in some regions, governmental decision makers. Investments are still low in the female health, although we see it's growing, although we see some dedicated funds that dedicate their financing to either women's led companies or women's health. It's not enough. It's yet we see a lot of investors that actually close the shades at the second we start to talk about women's health, and if you just compare it to cardiology or cancer, and you say, look, about half or even more than half of the world's population are women, and imagine how much can you gain from it. Even this doesn't lead them to open their wallets and give the money. So I think that awareness is definitely a keyword here. And the challenge is how to increase this awareness. And that's a specific work, just pushing this rock uphill. And the more we do such meetings, the more restricted males like me watching and seeing and hearing these presentations, the more awareness grow.
Thank you. And we need more male champions like you. Alyson, your restraints and challenges.
I think one of the restraints is to really consider who are the decision makers in science, because it really fuels the whole process. Whatever we publish in scientific literature, that's what gets put into health education. That's what future doctors use to treat patients. And so who's actually the decision makers? Who's creating the studies? Are they including both male and female animals, men and women in human clinical trials? Are they looking at it to design separately? Like I mentioned with even editorials. Who are the editors of these scientific journals? Who's funding these things? I think all of that, it really is the place to change first. When I started talking about these issues, 10, 15 years ago, most people would say to me, they didn't believe that looking at men and women specifically as different human beings was necessary. And it was data, just a nod to that too. So the data that we have collected over the past decade, these differences are overwhelming, and we can no longer just assume that something can be applied to both men and women without testing it. Yeah. I think one of, and when we think about reproducibility of science, the reproducibility of our science in social sciences and medical sciences is only 40%. It's the worst out of all the sciences. And it's because we really haven't taken this into account. I think one of the challenges is to really continue with the awareness issue. I think we all need to do our part to provide the aha moment to lots of other people, just to spread this word. I think by doing that, we should also be very cognizant of language. So women's health is not just about reproductive health. It's about all the issues that are so specific to that woman's health and wellness and well-being. Women don't have atypical symptoms of heart disease. They have typical symptoms of heart disease for women. So we've used men as the standard and then looked at women as a subgroup. And I just think we need to change that, in as many possible ways so we have a different framework looking forward.
Thank you. So our time's running short. So I just have one more question. Because I hate ending off on challenges and problems. I love ending off on optimism and hope. So the question I have to our panel is really, we've laid out that women's health is underserved, and we've also laid out that there's huge opportunities. So what would be your, number one area of opportunity that you would think about in women's health? And I think let's start with Brittany.
Number one, that is so tough because there's so many. I'm really excited about diagnostics. So I feel like there are a lot of women going into their physician saying something is wrong. And the physician has no diagnostics to test it, and they just have to go off their gut. And oftentimes they say, well, it's probably just your period. It's probably just in your head. it's not serious. And so I think if we have more diagnostics, then they can run the test and see and get an answer. So diagnostics for endometriosis, diagnostics for PCOS, ovarian cancer, even breast cancer. People think, oh, breast cancer, that's a solved issue. Mammograms are just imagery, right? We don't have a functional test. We don't have a saliva test yet for breast cancer. We're using literally images of shadows to tell women if they have lumps or not. And so I would say diagnostics.
Okay, Nimrod.
I thank you, Brittany. And I'm going to surprise you. I'm not going to talk about awareness. I think that digital health is one of the key factors today for very good progress in this field. It is both diagnostic and even therapeutic. It allows for remote monitoring, diagnostic, and treatment. So I assume that there is a huge opportunity here by using the digital health and the era we're living in to promote it.
Okay. Alyson, your take on the number one opportunity?
Is that we can start to fill in these gaps of knowledge of women. I see so many women that have been to many, many specialists. They're on so many medications. They have these chronic conditions that we just chalk up to psychiatric that was mentioned before. And so, for instance, we've recently learned from McGill University, they studied the pain processes, and most of the pain processes were studied in male mice. And so they actually did something crazy, and they studied it in female mice. And when they actually blocked the pathway of pain, that they understood that, that this is the pathway that male mice have. When they blocked that in female mice, it didn't work. So they went to look further and discovered that there's a different process of pain. Just there's a wholly different. Now, when we think about our pain our medications, our treatments, they were all designed to help pain that we've learned from a male model. And so I think that what's really exciting for me is that we can start to fill in some of these gaps for chronic diseases, for fibromyalgia, for irritable bowel, these things that just don't really have a pathophysiologic basis. It's just symptoms that women discuss. So I really look forward to understanding more about women's unique health needs.
And Keren, last but not least.
So I think education is key. We meet a lot of women, be customers, be our team, be, women across, the women's health industry. We don't know our bodies. We don't know to ask. We don't know what options are available for us in all kinds of disease areas. We feel ashamed sometimes to talk about it, even between friends, family, parents, doctors, physicians. I think education is key. I think that women's health companies need to step up and educate, not only with their specific product, but with the area in which they treat, detect, whatever they do. I have conversation with women that say, oh, I use an IUD. I love it. Oh, great. What IUD do you use? Is it copper or is it hormonal? I don't know. You don't know what you have in your body. No, I don't know. And so we really need to make sure to educate, for example, contraception as a title it's like an art, right? It's so different when you're 20 than when you're 45. Your needs are different. Who do you consult with? How do you know what to choose? What options are out there for you? So I really believe that education is key in women's health.
Well, thank you. I think just to conclude, these conversations that really amplify the tangible and the intangible value of women's health, they're critical to driving the momentum forward and expanding the space. And the more that we speak freely and embrace and adopt and champion and invest in solutions, technologies, clinical practice that improves women's health, the greater the promise and potential, not just for 51% of the world's population, but for the entire world's population. So as we conclude our evening, I really want to thank our esteemed panel for joining us, for their time, for sharing their incredible knowledge and insights with us, and for helping us create our community of practice to accelerate the market and to accelerate research and innovation in women's health. You've really opened our eyes to the wonderful opportunities that we have in our innovation toolbox and the incredible investment opportunities that lie ahead. Thank you to you all, and thank you to our wonderful audience for your participation. Michal will end the evening with her words of thanks.
I would just like to thank our board of directors for their dedication, innovative ideas, and constant support. If you want to take part and tackle the challenges of women's health head-on, join our community of practice. Become part of the inclusive healthcare needs-matched innovation to transform women's health, or speak in one of our next webinars. Please go to our website and sign up to our community or donate to assist us with our mission. Thank you so much.